Charlie, welcome to the show. I read your column this morning with a huge amount of interest, and you said, I'm 23, I count myself as a patriot, and once I'd have thought I would have fought and died for this country, yet I would rather be a conscientious objector than take up arms for Keir Starmer's Britain. How do you reach that conclusion?
Well, Martin, when I stand at the top of the Kent Downs near where I grew up and I look out across this grand patchwork that is England that my forefathers built and cultivated and handed down to me for preservation, when I stand in a Norman or Anglo-Saxon church and feel not just the presence of God, but of my forefathers there as well, the feet that stood there before me. When I go to the pub and I, interact with my countrymen, when I hear the music of Elgar and the Beatles and Oasis and all the rest of it, I know in my heart that I would fight and die for this country, right? But that's not what this is about. What I'm saying is, I'm not prepared to go to war, to go abroad, to be sent abroad by this utterly corrupt, morally bankrupt political class that has sold out this country, sold out my generation, sold our future down the river, on the altar of things like mass migration, net zero, deindustrialization. And so when when the prospect of conscription is raised, the idea of being sent to Ukraine or to Gaza or to wherever else, the idea of fighting and dying for what amounts of British and American foreign policy interests is just outrageous to me. It's an outrageous proposition to die on the altar of, essentially the military-industrial complex based in America. And it's, no surprise as well that so many of my peers feel this way as well. 41% of under-30s would take up arms under no circumstances to defend Britain, and that includes if Britain were to be invaded. And I can't, as much as it's demoralising and depressing to hear this news, I can't blame them, because I feel so strongly with my peers that this is a country that at this point doesn't feel like it's worth defending. Because one thing, what are we defending? What does it mean to be British in the 21st century? If you listen to either the Conservative Party or the Labour Party, it's British values, it's democracy, tolerance, the rule of law and individual liberty and tolerance of different faiths and sort of thing. Pretty thin gruel. That's not a meaningful identity. And then thereafter, who are we defending? When we talk about Britain. Because, again, this doomed project of mass migration that we've been subject to over the last 30 years has transformed this country to be unrecognisable. And once again, it's no surprise that my peers and my countrymen feel no sense of identity, no sense of belonging, no sense of purpose or place in this country. And so these statistics are not surprising.
Charlie, it's sobering stuff, but it's something I've heard from servicemen myself on the show, SAS operatives who say the same thing. And it's a crisis when you think about it. Is it something fundamental, and that is you wouldn't fight for a country, you don't feel the country has fought for you, for your values?
Well, that's quite right. I mean, I for my entire life, I've had the privilege of living in England, and I grew up in England, and I was, knowingly or not, my parents immersed me in English culture from the day I was born. Holidays were always to Cornwall to eat roast dinners and have, scones and tea and go to castles and to parks and have picnics and all the rest of it. I love this country. I love it more than anything. And yet, the political class that's governed it for my entire life, beginning with Blair, right the way through to Cameron, to Sunak, Johnson, etc., have just betrayed this country. They've betrayed the people of this country who are, who never asked for any of this stuff to be inflicted on them. We never voted for things like mass migration, for things like deindustrialization, for things like net zero and all the rest of it. All of these things that are making life hard for, not just for young people, but for everyone. Because, Martin, I don't know if you've been out there recently, but people are really struggling. People are really seriously struggling out there. And it makes me want to cry. It makes me so angry, the way that this country is being run into the ground. And Starmer is a particularly egregious example, but he's the latest in a long line of people who have, just acted against the interest of this country at every turn. And I think it comes down to this pathological ideology that has captured our political class, that views this country as somewhere that's not a kind of ancient ancestral homeland, but as somewhere that is essentially a balance sheet. It's an economic zone to be understood in terms of profit and loss. And everything else flows downstream from that. The project of mass migration, the way in which our economy has been so deindustrialized, and so, young men, for example, are trapped in these air-conditioned, brightly lit offices where they feel totally crushed and without purpose and all the rest of it. No surprise, therefore, that they're being attracted to more radical politics. I mean, I think that there is a place for radicalism, and in the 21st century, as an Englishman, and as a young person, you should look at the offerings that the political class give us in this country and think, no, I demand better.
OK, Charlie Downes, we have to leave it there. Astonishing stuff. Thank you very, very much for coming on the show today and sharing your passion. Incredible.
Thank you very much for watching. If you like what I do, please consider liking this video and following me on here and elsewhere. You can find all of my work and links on my website, cfdownes.uk. If you really like what I do, you'll notice a support button on my website where you can send me a small one-off or recurring donation. I am truly grateful for all of your support. Goodbye.